We left just after evening prayer, the sky already gone flat and dark in that winter way that comes early in the mountains. December had stripped the road of color. Everything beyond the headlights felt pressed down and muted, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Snow had not fallen yet, but the cold was settled in deep. The kind that makes the air feel heavy and metallic when you breathe. My brother drove carefully. This road was familiar to him, but only in daylight. At night it became something else. Narrow, uneven, cut into the mountain with no shoulder and no guardrails in long stretches. One wrong move meant a steep drop into trees and rock. We were going to collect a relative from a village further up before snowfall blocked the pass. Waiting another day was not an option. Fog started about 30 minutes in, not the light kind that drifts. This was thick and low, sliding across the asphalt in bands, clinging to the slopes. The headlights cut into it, but did not reach far. The beams felt short, swallowed after a few meters. I sat quietly watching the road. I noticed my brother slowing more than usual. His foot kept easing off the accelerator, even on straight sections. The engine sound dipped and rose in a careful rhythm. At first I thought he was worried about black ice. Then I saw it too. Movement, just beyond the edge of the light. Not crossing the road. Running parallel to it. Always on the downhill side, where the fog was densest. The beam would catch part of it for a fraction of a second. A shape. Tall. Thin. Then gone again. I tried to place it. Goats were common here, but they moved differently. Shorter. Closer to the ground. This was higher, the top of it rising near the height of the side mirror. People sometimes walked these roads, but not at night, not in this cold, and not at that speed. The movement kept pace with the car. When my brother slowed, it slowed. When he sped up slightly, it matched us. The shape never entered the full light. It stayed at the edge, where vision breaks down and depth becomes uncertain. The road curved left, hugging the mountain. The fog thinned briefly as wind pushed it aside. In that clearer pocket, I saw more. It was upright, leaning forward as it ran. The arms hung low and stiff, not swinging naturally. The head was down, neck stretched forward. The legs moved fast but unevenly, like someone running on a slope they could not fully control. I felt my stomach tighten. My hands were cold despite the heater. I focused on breathing slowly, counting each inhale. The shape stayed exactly where the beam faded. Never closer, never farther, as if it knew the limit of the light and respected it. My brother's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The car slowed again. The tires hummed softly on the cold asphalt. Gravel clicked under the chassis when we passed a rough patch. Then he flicked off the high beams. The darkness closed in instantly. The fog swallowed everything beyond the hood. And the sound stopped. There had been a sound the whole time, low and steady, almost lost under the engine. A rhythmic thudding, like shoes hitting packed dirt or loose gravel. When the lights went low, that sound cut off as if someone had switched it off. The silence pressed hard against my ears. My brother turned the high beams back on. The sound resumed immediately. Louder. Closer. The rhythm was faster now, heavier. Whatever was running had closed the distance in the moment of darkness. The shape appeared again at the edge of the beam, but now it felt larger. The outline sharper. The forward lean more aggressive. My heart started pounding. Not a rush. A heavy, controlled thump that filled my chest and throat. I kept my eyes fixed on the passenger side, afraid to miss any change. The road narrowed. Loose rock lined the edge. The drop beyond disappeared into fog. The shape stayed with us, feet hitting something uneven. I could hear small stones being kicked aside. The car climbed steadily. My brother did not speed. He did not slow further. His driving became precise, measured, as if any sudden move might invite disaster. The fog thickened again. Visibility dropped. The shape faded, then returned, always there, always just out of reach of clear sight. I started noticing details that made my skin crawl. The running was too smooth for a human on that terrain. No stumbles. No changes in pace when the road dipped or rose. The arms still hung wrong, stiff and low, not balancing the body. The head never turned toward us. It faced forward, focused on keeping pace. We reached a short straight stretch where the fog thinned again. This time the beam caught more of the body. It was a man. That was clear now. Thin, tall, wrapped in dark clothing that blended into the night. His back was hunched forward, spine curved. His arms were down at his sides, hands near his knees as he ran. His face was turned slightly away, but I saw enough to know he was not looking at us. His shoes were not shoes. His feet were bare. They struck the rocky shoulder with force, not slowing, not flinching. The skin looked dark, thickened, as if hardened by cold and rough ground. I felt a surge of fear that had nothing to do with imagination. This was a person, a real one, and that made it worse. The explanation raced through my mind without words. Smuggler, mentally unwell, someone fleeing something, someone testing drivers, someone desperate. The man stayed exactly at the edge of the beam again, as if he had stepped back into that boundary on purpose. The sound grew louder still. The footfalls came closer to the car. My brother eased slightly to the left, giving more space between the vehicle and the shoulder. The man adjusted instantly, maintaining distance. The road curved again, tighter this time. The car slowed for safety. The running sound matched it. When we picked up speed on the exit, the sound did too. Minutes passed like this. Long, stretched, heavy minutes. My jaw ached from clenching. My legs were rigid. Ahead, faint lights appeared through the fog. A cluster of yellow points, steady and low. A checkpoint hut used by local authorities during winter months. It was sometimes staffed, sometimes empty, but the structure was always there. As the lights grew clearer, the running sound changed. It faltered for the first time. The rhythm broke. The footfalls slowed. The shape drifted back, losing ground. When the headlights reached the edge of the lit area, the sound stopped again. This time it did not resume. I watched the shoulder carefully as we passed the hut. Nothing moved. No shape. No shadow. My brother pulled into the wide gravel area beside the structure. He shut off the engine. The sudden quiet rang in my ears. I waited. My breathing slowed. The fog rolled past the lights in pale sheets. After several minutes, I stepped out, keeping the door open. The cold bit into my face. The ground was empty. No footprints near the road. Only older tracks pressed into frozen dirt, partly erased by wind. Bare feet would not leave clear prints here. The surface was too hard. Later, after we reached our destination and the night settled back into something ordinary, the explanation became clearer. That stretch of road runs alongside known smuggling routes. People sometimes run beside vehicles to see who is inside, to intimidate, to signal others further up. Some locals also suffer from severe mental illness worsened by cold and isolation. Running barefoot was not unheard of. Staying just out of the light kept drivers from identifying them clearly, from recognizing faces. The timing made sense. The fog helped him stay hidden. The lights of the hut marked a boundary he did not want to cross. Knowing this did not erase the memory. I still remember the way he matched our speed. The way the sound stopped the moment the lights changed. The way his body moved wrong, not because he was unreal, but because something real had gone deeply wrong. That road remains passable only in daylight now. I refuse to travel it at night. Not because of stories or fear of the unknown, but because I know what kind of people survive in places where help is far and winter is close, and how thin the line is between the road and whatever waits just beyond the light. May 2020 was quiet in a way that felt wrong. Southern California freeways were never empty before that spring. During the lockdown, they turned into long gray corridors with nothing moving except delivery cars and the occasional semi. I was driving nights because the pay was better and the roads were clear. At 3:18 in the morning, I was on my second coffee, hands dry from sanitizer, phone mounted on the dash, delivery app glowing white and blue in the dark. I had just picked up food from a place that normally closed at 10, but stayed open for delivery only. The order was marked as priority. The customer address sat somewhere south of where I usually worked. The GPS line ran straight along the freeway for another 12 miles. Traffic was almost nothing. Every sound inside the car felt louder than normal. The engine, the air vents, the soft rattle of the food containers in the insulated bag behind me. About 2 minutes later, the GPS chirped and the map shifted. A reroute message flashed, then disappeared. The blue line bent sharply to the right. An exit appeared ahead that I had never seen before. Exit 14. The sign was small and low, bolted to a crooked metal arm. The green paint had faded to a dull brown in places. Reflective coating peeled in strips. The lettering looked older than the freeway around it. I hesitated, then followed the arrow. I trusted the app. I was tired and ready to finish the shift. The off-ramp peeled away from the main lanes and dropped fast. It was too steep. The curve felt tighter than it should have been. My headlights aimed down into darkness instead of forward. The concrete barriers were close enough that I could see every crack and stain as I passed. There were no reflectors, no emergency phones, no graffiti, The ramp spiraled down once, then again, tighter each time. My ears popped from the descent. The radio lost signal and filled with static. I turned it off. At the bottom, the road leveled out and ended almost immediately. No merge, no continuation, just a straight stretch of asphalt that stopped at a chain-link fence. Beyond it sat a cluster of houses. 5 of them, maybe 6. Single-story, old stucco, flat roofs. Every house had lights on inside. Warm yellow light behind curtains and blinds. Porches lit. Driveways empty. No cars. No trash bins. No street signs. No sound. I rolled forward slowly and stopped well before the fence. I sat there with my foot on the brake. The delivery address still showed active. The GPS arrow pointed straight ahead into the houses. My phone showed 1 bar, then none. No signal. No loading circle. The time stayed frozen at 3:18. I took my foot off the brake and the car idled. The headlights lit the fence and the weeds growing through cracked pavement. I did not see movement anywhere. No wind. No dogs. No distant traffic noise. The freeway above felt gone. I checked my mirrors. The ramp behind me was there, sloping up into darkness. I put the car in reverse and started backing up. After a few seconds, the slope behind me looked wrong. Shorter, like it did not climb as far as it should have. I stopped, put the car in drive, and turned around. The ramp was gone. There was only a blank wall of dirt and brush where the road had been. No concrete edge. No guardrail. It looked like the side of a hill that had always been there. My headlights swept across it and showed uneven ground and dry plants. I stared at it, then looked back toward the houses. My breathing felt loud. I forced it slower. I checked my phone again. No signal. The delivery app still showed the order active. The address text blurred for a moment, then sharpened. The house number did not match any visible building. The map showed me parked on a normal street. I pulled forward toward the fence. I wanted to get closer and see if there was a gate or break. The car rolled over a shallow dip. No sound from the tires. No vibration. The fence filled the windshield. I did not brake in time. The car passed through. There was no jolt. No scrape. No sound of metal. The fence stayed intact in my mirrors as I moved through it. My headlights swept across pavement again, fresh lane markings bright and clean. I was driving at freeway speed without having pressed the gas. The road straightened. The noise of tires on asphalt returned. Wind sound filled the cabin. Other headlights appeared ahead and behind me. I was back on the freeway. I slowed and moved to the right lane. My hands shook on the wheel. My heart felt like it had been running. I checked the mirrors. No sign of an exit behind me. No exit 14 sign. The mile markers made sense again. My phone buzzed. The delivery app updated. Order completed. Payment processed. Tip added. I pulled off at the next normal exit and parked under bright lights at a closed gas station. I sat there for a long time. I checked the car for damage. None. No bent bumper. No scratches. I walked around the tires. No debris. I opened the insulated bag. It was empty. I went home and slept with the lights on. The next day I checked my earnings. The order was listed with a delivery time of 0 minutes. The address did not exist when I searched it. The payment stayed in my balance. I drove the same freeway again a week later during the day. I watched every sign. I drove it at night again after that. I never saw exit 14. I checked maps online. There was no record of it. No construction plans. No closed ramps. The explanation that makes sense to me now came later. During the lockdown, the state rushed temporary access routes for emergency housing and supply distribution. Some were built fast and removed fast. Some used modular barriers and temporary signage. Some entrances were misprogrammed into navigation systems before they were taken down. I believe I was routed onto a service ramp that had already been sealed off and covered. I believe the darkness, the speed, and my exhaustion filled the gaps. I believe the fence had been removed, and I drove through an open space that my mind later rebuilt as solid. I also believe the houses were not real residences but temporary structures, lit to discourage trespassing and theft. No cars because no one lived there yet. No sound because it was meant to stay unnoticed. What I cannot explain is the ramp disappearing behind me, or the way the fence felt like air, or how the food vanished without leaving a smell or spill. I cannot explain the frozen time on my phone, or the order completing itself. I stopped working nights after that. I still deliver sometimes, but only during the day. I avoid reroutes. I ignore unknown exits. I watched the signs closely. Freeways look normal again now, crowded and loud, but sometimes at night I think about how thin the line felt between lanes that existed and roads that did not, and how easily I followed a glowing arrow into a place that was never meant to be used the way I used it. I was driving north along the coast because I wanted the road to do the thinking for me. The date had ended badly in a quiet way that left no clear reason to be angry, only tired. We had eaten fast food in a parking lot because everything else was closed. Conversation stalled early. There was nothing dramatic to remember, which somehow made it worse. I hugged her, got back in my car, and chose the longer coastal route home because I did not want to sit in silence on the main highway. February nights in the Pacific Northwest settle in fast. The sky had already gone black by the time I reached the 2-lane stretch that hugs the cliffs. The ocean stayed hidden beyond the trees, but I could smell it through the vents. Salt and rot and cold air. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through damp asphalt and tall evergreens. The road markings were faded. Reflectors blinked and vanished as I passed them. No traffic came from either direction. It felt like driving through a place people forgot once they left it. My mood stayed flat. No music played. The heater hummed low. The windshield wipers squeaked every few seconds, even though there was no rain, just mist drifting in from the water. The speed limit dropped without warning. I slowed and stayed there, coasting through long curves that leaned toward the dark. That was when I saw someone standing on the shoulder ahead. At first it looked like a road sign. Then the shape shifted in the beam and resolved into a person. He stood close to the edge of the pavement, not moving, facing the road. No car was pulled over nearby. No bike. No bag. Just him and the trees. I eased off the gas. People do strange things on coastal roads. Campers wander back from overlooks. Locals cut through forest trails that spit them out in unexpected places. I told myself that as I rolled closer. When he raised one arm, slow and stiff, I felt a small drop in my stomach. He wore clothes that did not fit the season. A thin jacket that hung loose at the shoulders. Pants too short, cuffs hovering above his ankles. No gloves. No hat. His shoes looked worn flat. I noticed these details in quick pieces, the way the brain grabs at anything familiar when something feels wrong. I stopped a few car lengths away. The engine idled. The beams washed over him, pale and steady. He stepped closer to the edge of the road, then stopped again. He did not squint or shield his eyes. He stared straight ahead as if the light did not bother him. He gestured toward me with a slow motion that felt rehearsed. I cracked the window enough to let his voice reach me, expecting to hear the usual request for a phone or a ride or directions. Instead, he asked how to get back to the road. The words landed wrong. We were already on it. The pavement stretched clean and empty in both directions. Trees pressed in on either side. There was nowhere else to be. His voice sounded close and far at the same time, flat but carrying, as if it bounced off hard walls before reaching me. The sound reminded me of underpasses where voices echo even when no one raises them. I pointed ahead without thinking. My arm moved before my thoughts caught up. The road curved gently to the right, disappearing between dark trunks. That was the only answer that made sense. He followed my gesture with his eyes. He nodded once. Then he stepped backward off the shoulder. He did not turn. His feet moved in a straight line, heel then toe, retreating into the trees while his face stayed pointed at the road. Branches brushed his jacket. Needles bent and snapped back. The light from my headlights caught his clothes in fragments between trunks, then lost them. I sat there longer than I should have. The engine vibrated through the steering wheel. My foot stayed on the brake. The sense that something unfinished remained clung to me, tight and cold. Eventually I told myself there was nothing else to do. I released the brake and drove on. The road bent as expected. The forest thickened. My beams swept across moss and ferns, wet bark shining dull green. I checked the rearview mirror out of habit. He stood far back on the shoulder, much farther than made sense. The distance was wrong. He should have been hidden by the curve, swallowed by the dark. Instead he was there, small but clear, facing me, nodding in the same slow motion. His arm lifted again, not waving, just held up as if frozen mid-signal. I kept driving. The image stayed in the mirror longer than it should have. Then it vanished all at once, replaced by empty road and shadow. My heart rate climbed. My hands tightened on the wheel. I told myself it was a trick of perspective, of adrenaline, of a tired brain filling gaps. The rational explanations came fast and thin. The forest played games with depth. The headlights stretched shapes. People did odd things. None of it settled the feeling. The rest of the drive passed without incident. I reached a stretch with more houses, more lights. The normal world returned piece by piece. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in the car for a minute before going inside. Sleep came late and light. The explanation did not arrive all at once. It took days. A week later I mentioned the encounter to a co-worker who grew up along that coast. I described the road without naming it. He knew it anyway. He told me about an old service trail that ran parallel to the highway for a short distance before diving back into the forest. It dated back to logging days, long abandoned, barely visible now. In some places it ran close enough that a person walking it could step out onto the shoulder without crossing open ground. I went looking. Curiosity outweighed discomfort. I drove the same route in daylight. The forest looked harmless then, just dense and tangled. After a few miles, I found a break in the trees where the undergrowth thinned. There was the trail. Narrow, sunken, easy to miss. It ran straight and flat for a while, then dipped away from the road into deeper woods. I walked a short distance along it. Sound changed there. The road noise dulled, flattened, bounced oddly between trunks. My footsteps echoed back at me in a way that felt delayed. When I spoke out loud to test it, my voice carried farther than expected, stretched thin and strange. The air smelled stale, trapped. I stood where the trail came closest to the highway. From that spot, stepping backward would put someone into the trees while keeping them aligned with the road. In the dark, with headlights cutting across at an angle, distance would compress. A person farther back could appear closer. A curve could hide the retreat, while leaving the figure visible in a mirror longer than logic allowed. I pictured the man walking that trail at night without proper clothes, maybe disoriented, maybe drunk, maybe suffering from something that bent his sense of place. He reached the road and did not recognize it as such. He asked how to get back because the concept of road had slipped, replaced by some internal map that no longer matched the world. When I pointed ahead, he took it literally, returning to the path he knew, moving backward to keep the road in view because turning around felt wrong or frightening. The nodding stuck with me. It could have been a habitual motion, a self-soothing gesture, repeated without awareness. The outdated clothes suggested someone who had been out there longer than he should have been, living on the margins, avoiding towns. The lack of phone fit that picture. So did the absence of urgency. None of this made the memory comfortable, but it grounded it. There was no impossible thing left unexplained. Just a person out of place and a road that bent perception under the right conditions. I reported the encounter to a local non-emergency line, described the location, the trail, the man. They thanked me and said they would pass it along. I never heard anything more. I still drive that highway. I slow near that stretch without meaning to. I check the shoulder and the tree line. I keep going. The road remains a road. The forest remains a forest. Some nights, when mist drifts low and sound carries strangely, I think about how easy it is to stand somewhere familiar and feel lost, and how thin the line is between asking for help and not knowing how to accept it. I left my parents' place later than planned. Thanksgiving had stretched into that heavy quiet where nobody wants to be the first to leave. By the time I loaded my car and pulled away, the sky was already black and flat, the kind of night that presses down instead of opening up. I had classes on Monday. I wanted to be back in my apartment before midnight. I had made that drive on I-70 dozens of times. Eastern Colorado at night is not dramatic. It is long, empty, and honest about it. The highway was dry and cold. The temperature gauge hovered just above freezing. The wind pushed from the north in steady pulses that nudged the car but never shoved it. My headlights cut 2 clean lanes through the dark, pale beams stretching over asphalt and scrub. The median was wide and flat, mostly dirt with dead grass and patches of snow that had not melted from the last storm. Reflectors blinked past in a slow rhythm. There was almost no traffic. Every few minutes, a semi passed in the opposite direction, its lights flaring and then dissolving behind me. I drove with the radio off. I do that on long night drives. It keeps me alert. I had a dashcam mounted under the rearview mirror, installed a month earlier after a close call near Denver. A small red light told me it was recording. I checked it once out of habit and kept going. Fatigue settled in the way it always does, not like sleepiness but like narrowing. The world shrinks to the lane lines and the reach of the headlights. Thoughts come and go without finishing. My breathing synced with the road noise. I was not scared or anxious. I was focused on getting back. Several miles east of Limon, I noticed something in the median ahead. At first it registered as a dark pile against lighter dirt. Roadkill is common out there. Deer, coyotes, the occasional cow that broke a fence. I lifted my foot slightly, not braking, just easing off the gas, waiting for my eyes to sort it out. The shape was wrong. It was too tall to be a carcass, too narrow in some places, too bent in others. It looked folded instead of collapsed. As I got closer, the headlights caught a surface that was not fur or hide. It was skin or fabric, matte and uneven. My foot went to the brake without a decision forming in my head. The thing moved. It did not rise. It adjusted. A shift of weight. A joint straightening. It was kneeling in the median, one knee down, the other bent, torso angled forward as if bracing against wind. Its arms were close to its body. The posture was deliberate, balanced. I slowed more, my heart rate spiking, but my hands steady on the wheel. There was enough space. It was not in my lane. I did not swerve. I did not honk. I stared. As I passed, it lifted its head. The face caught my headlights for less than a second, but that second stretched. The eyes reflected light the way animal eyes do, bright and focused, but the shape around them was human. Brow, nose, mouth. The expression was not panic or confusion. It was fixed. A hard look that tracked my car as I went by. The eyes followed me through the windshield, then through the side window, then through the rear glass. There was anger in that look. Not wild anger. Directed anger. My brake lights came on fully. I felt the pedal under my foot, firm and controlled, slowing the car well below the speed limit. I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me. The road ahead stayed empty. The median was already behind. I did not turn around. I did not pull over. I accelerated and put distance between myself and that spot. My chest felt tight. My breathing was loud in my ears. I watched the dashcam light, steady red, and kept my eyes on the road. For the next 20 miles, I scanned every overpass and shoulder. I expected to see someone walking along the road, reflective tape flashing, a stranded car, anything that would make sense of what I had seen. There was nothing. The land stayed flat and open. The exits slid past without change. By the time I reached my apartment complex, my hands ached from gripping the wheel. I parked, sat for a moment, and then shut the car off. The silence felt heavy. I did not look back at the road. Inside, I dropped my bag and went straight to my desk. I pulled the memory card from the dashcam and slid it into my laptop. I needed confirmation. Proof that I had not imagined posture, movement, expression. The footage loaded quickly. The timestamp was correct. The speed data matched my drive. The road appeared exactly as I remembered it. Empty lanes, pale headlights, reflectors ticking by. I leaned forward as the median ahead came into view. There was nothing there. No shape. No movement. The dirt and grass were undisturbed. The camera showed my brake lights flare red as I slowed for no visible reason. The audio picked up my breathing growing louder and faster. The headlights swept past a blank stretch of median. I replayed it, slowed it, frame by frame. Still nothing. I slept badly. In the morning, the memory was still sharp. It did not fade or soften. I could recall the angle of the shoulders, the balance of the kneeling stance, the way the head lifted against the wind. I emailed my dashcam manufacturer and described the glitch. They replied later that day with a standard explanation about dropped frames, sensor noise in low light, and the limits of wide-angle lenses. They said objects outside the lane can appear or disappear depending on contrast and speed. They suggested updating the firmware. That explanation bothered me because it did not fit the physical response I had. I had not reacted to a shadow or a blur. I had braked because something had occupied space in front of me. I spent the next week digging through local reports. I searched for accidents, police logs, missing persons. I found an article from a small eastern Colorado paper dated 2 days before Thanksgiving. A farm worker had been struck and killed on I-70 at night while retrieving debris from the median after a truck lost part of its load. The article mentioned reflective gear. It mentioned poor lighting. It mentioned the body was found kneeling, facing traffic, the position suggesting the person had been trying to lift something heavy. The location was within a few miles of where I had seen the figure. I contacted the paper and asked for more details. They told me the person had been wearing a dark jacket with reflective strips on the arms and chest. The strips were angled and worn. At night, they could look like eyes if caught just right. The face had been exposed. The death had been ruled an accident. The debris was scrap metal. I went back to the footage one more time after reading that. I watched the headlights wash over the median. I imagined reflective tape flaring and fading between frames. I imagined a kneeling person turning their head as a car passed, eyes catching light, expression misread through glass and speed and fear. The dashcam did not capture it because the contrast was wrong. The angle was wrong. The sensor smoothed it away. I still remember the eyes. I still remember the feeling of being watched with intent. Memory fills gaps. Stress sharpens edges. At highway speed, the brain makes fast decisions and writes stories around them. I drove that stretch again months later in daylight. The median was wider than I remembered. The ground dipped slightly where the grass thinned. A person kneeling there would be lower than expected. Harder to see until close. I did not stop. I keep the dashcam updated now. I do not drive with the radio off anymore. When I pass that part of I-70 at night, I stay in the left lane and hold my speed steady. I do not scan the median the way I used to. I focus forward and let the road stay empty. What I saw was real enough to make me brake. What the camera missed does not change that. The explanation fits the facts. A tired driver, low light, reflective material, a human shape in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nothing supernatural. Nothing impossible. Just a moment where a person and a car crossed paths, and only one of them knew it happened. The funeral ended earlier than expected, not because it went smoothly, but because everyone was too tired to linger. By the time Mark and I left, the sky had gone flat and colorless, the kind that makes late afternoon feel like evening already. We drove for hours after that, barely speaking, the car filled with the smell of old upholstery and the dry heat that never quite left even after sunset. By the time the clock on the dashboard clicked to 11:47 p.m., my eyes felt gritty and my shoulders ached from holding tension for too long. The road was a narrow two-lane highway cutting through farmland and low tree lines. No streetlights, no reflective signs except the occasional mile marker that flashed past and vanished. Grief makes time strange. I remember stretches of road without remembering driving them. I remember Mark shifting in his seat and rolling down the window, the rush of warm air filling the car. He wanted to smoke. I did not want to stop. I wanted to get home, park, shut the engine off, and sit in silence. But grief makes you passive. It dulls the edge where you usually push back. When he pointed out a gravel pull-off ahead, I slowed without really deciding to. The pull-off was nothing official. No sign. No painted lines. Just a break in the weeds where tires had crushed the grass flat over time. I turned off the highway and felt the car sink slightly as the tires met loose gravel. The sound was loud in the quiet, the crunch echoing farther than it should have. I stopped a few feet from the tree line and put the car in park. The engine ticked as it cooled. The darkness pressed in immediately, thick and close, broken only by our headlights cutting a narrow cone into the weeds. Mark opened his door and stepped out. The dome light came on for a moment, then went dark when he shut it. I stayed inside, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. That was when I noticed the other car. It was parked behind us, offset slightly to the left, close enough that its shape was clear but far enough back that it sat mostly in shadow. Its lights were off. All of them. No headlights. No parking lights. I had not seen it approach. I was certain of that. The highway behind us had been empty when I turned off. I would have noticed another set of headlights. There was nowhere for it to come from except the road. I felt a tight pull in my stomach that had nothing to do with grief. I checked the mirrors, then looked back over my shoulder. The car was still there. Dark. Silent. A man stood beside it. He was positioned near the rear quarter panel, facing the trees. His posture was upright, arms at his sides, head tilted slightly forward as if listening to something beyond the weeds. He was not using a phone. There was no glow in his hands. There was no cigarette ember. He was completely still. The kind of stillness that does not come from relaxation, but from intention. The headlights from my car reached him at an angle, lighting the side of his body and leaving his face half in shadow. I watched him for several seconds, waiting for a normal movement. A shift of weight. A scratch. Something. Nothing happened. The quiet felt heavier the longer it stretched. Mark noticed him then. I saw Mark turn his head toward the other car. His body language changed. He straightened, hesitated, then took a few steps in that direction. I wanted to tell him to get back in. The thought came fully formed and urgent. My mouth stayed closed. Grief had already stolen my reflexes. The man turned. The movement was wrong. His upper body rotated first, smooth and fast, his shoulders and head swinging toward us before his hips followed. It was not jerky. It was too clean, like a hinge that had been oiled recently. When his face came into full view, he smiled. The smile did not reach his eyes. That detail sounds small, but it mattered. His mouth stretched wide, teeth visible, lips pulled tight, while his eyes stayed flat and unblinking. They did not narrow or crease. They did not react at all. The expression looked placed there, not grown. Something cold slid through my chest. I did not think. I reached out and locked the doors. The sound was loud in the quiet car, a sharp mechanical click that seemed to echo. I remember thinking it was too late to undo it, even if I wanted to. Mark turned back toward me at the sound, confusion on his face, then anger. He moved toward the passenger door. I shook my head without realizing I was doing it. The man started walking. At first it was normal. His steps were measured, shoes crunching lightly on gravel. He moved directly toward Mark, not toward me or the car. His eyes never left Mark's face. His smile stayed fixed. After a few steps, his pace increased. Not a jog, not a run. Something between, like someone who knows exactly how fast they need to move to close distance before a decision can be made. Mark reached the door and pulled the handle. It did not open. He pulled again harder. His body language shifted from irritation to panic in a heartbeat. He raised his hand and struck the window with the flat of his palm. The sound was dull and thick through the glass. His mouth was open. His face was twisted in fear. He was looking past me, not at me. I looked in the side mirror. The man was closer now, no more than 20 feet away. His arms swung loosely at his sides. His posture was relaxed. There was no sign of effort in his movement. His eyes were still wide and empty. My hands were shaking so hard I had trouble getting the key turned. The engine coughed, then started. The headlights flared brighter, washing the man in full light. For a split second, his smile faltered. It was the only change I saw. He did not slow. Mark hit the window again. I unlocked the door without thinking about it. The handle jerked open and he fell into the seat, half collapsing as I slammed the door shut and locked it again. Gravel sprayed as I hit the gas. The tires spun before catching. The car lurched forward and back onto the highway. I did not look back. I kept my eyes on the road, hands locked on the wheel, breathing shallow and fast. My heart felt too large for my chest. The highway stretched ahead, empty and dark, the center line flashing under the headlights in a steady rhythm. After several miles, my breathing slowed enough that I could think. Mark sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His hands were shaking. There was a red mark on his palm from hitting the glass. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt fragile, like sound might shatter something if we let it in. We did not stop again. We did not slow down. When we reached a small town with actual streetlights and a gas station glowing like a beacon, I felt the tension ease slightly, but it did not leave. It followed us all the way home. Later, when we talked about it in the clear light of morning, we compared details. The car behind us had no plates we could remember. The man's clothes were plain, nothing distinctive. No smell of smoke. No sound except his footsteps. The way he turned was what stayed with both of us. The way his face did not match itself. I thought about the timing, how the car appeared without sound, how he stood facing the trees as if waiting, how he chose to move only when noticed. Nothing about it required anything impossible. People wait in dark places. People approach strangers. People smile when they should not. What made it unbearable was how deliberate it all felt. I still drive that stretch of highway sometimes. I never stop at unmarked pull-offs. When I see a car on the shoulder with its lights off, I keep going. Grief fades. Instinct does not. I was 22 and newly graduated, which meant I had a degree, a job offer, and almost no money. I left Reno later than planned, because I was packing my entire life into the trunk of a tired sedan. I told myself I could make it overnight. Hotels were a luxury I could not justify. Sleep felt optional if it meant keeping a few $100s. US 95 at night is not empty in the way people imagine. It is full of absence. The desert flattens distance and erases scale. Hills look close until they are not. The road floats through darkness like a ribbon laid on water. My headlights carved a tunnel that ended too soon. Beyond it, nothing felt fixed. By 2 in the morning my body felt hollow. My eyes were dry and alert in a way that did not feel healthy. I had caffeine without warmth. The dashboard clock glowed a dull blue. The radio found only static and distant voices that bled into each other. I shut it off and drove in silence, listening to the tires and the wind pressing at the doors. The right side reflectors were my anchor. They came at steady intervals, white flashes ticking time forward. In Nevada, they are often closer to the pavement, small discs mounted low. After a long stretch past Tonopah, I noticed the rhythm shift. The reflectors began to arc inward, not sharply, just enough to register. It looked like the highway was bending toward me. I slowed. My first thought was construction. My second was heat distortion, even though it was October and cold. The desert plays tricks at night. I knew that. I told myself that. The curve persisted. The reflectors did not align with posts anymore. They lifted slightly, then dropped, like a slow breath. I took my foot off the accelerator and watched. The flashes rose higher than the shoulder, then sank below it. The pattern repeated. I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me. The left side was empty. The right side kept time with my speed. I eased down another 5 miles per hour. The movement slowed with me. The reflectors did not pass. They stayed beside my rear door, just beyond the line where the pavement gave up to dirt. The distance stayed constant. That was when the idea stopped feeling abstract. I braked harder, enough to feel the seatbelt pull. The reflectors stopped. Not drifted. Stopped. They froze in place, hovering at the edge of my light. I rolled forward again. They started with me, rising and falling in the same rhythm. Animals do not do that. Deer panic. Coyotes dart. Even a horse would not match speed for that long on uneven ground. Lane discipline requires awareness of the road. It requires intent. I kept driving. My hands were tight on the wheel. My mouth felt dry. The desert on the right was a dark slope of scrub and rock. I could not see a body. Only the white points and the way they moved together, 2 of them, sometimes 3, depending on angle. They stayed low. They stayed smart. I tried to convince myself it was a maintenance vehicle with lights misaligned, but there was no engine sound. No vibration. No dust plume. Just motion. The reflectors drifted closer. Not onto the road, but close enough that I could imagine weight shifting under them. They rose higher once, high enough that the light caught a vertical line, then dropped again. The line looked like fabric. I sped up. The engine whined. The car shook slightly as it climbed past 70. The reflectors kept pace. The rhythm stayed steady. Rise, fall. Rise, fall. Mile after mile. I counted posts to stay focused. The numbers blurred. My thoughts narrowed. I considered stopping, then dismissed it. I considered turning off the headlights, then dismissed that too. I considered swerving left, but the road was empty and wide, and the idea of losing control felt worse than whatever this was. I slowed again, more gradually this time. The reflectors matched me. I tapped the brakes twice. They paused, then resumed when I did. That confirmation landed heavy. Whatever was out there was watching my car, not the road. The desert has no sound at night until it does. Wind moved through brush and waves. A distant rumble might have been a truck far off or thunder. My own breathing sounded loud. I focused on keeping the car centered. After nearly a mile, the reflectors began to lag. Not much, just enough to notice. I held my speed steady. They fell back a few feet, then more. The rise and fall grew uneven. One reflector dipped lower than the others and did not come back up as high. They stopped again, this time farther back. I did not brake. I kept going. The white points shrank, then vanished into the dark. The road straightened. The reflectors returned to their posts, fixed and predictable. The rhythm went back to normal. I drove another 20 miles without stopping. My shoulders hurt from tension. My eyes burned. I kept scanning the right side, expecting movement. Nothing came. Near Hawthorne, I pulled into a small rest area as the sky began to lighten at the edges. I sat in the car with the engine running and waited for my pulse to slow. When I finally stepped out, the cold felt sharp and clean. The desert looked harmless in gray light. On the ground near the trash bins, I saw a scrap of reflective tape. It was the same dull white as the road markers, but flexible, creased. Nearby, there were faint footprints in the dust, uneven and deep, like someone had been running with weight on their back. Later that morning, after sleeping in the car and continuing on, I stopped at a gas station and checked local news on my phone. There had been a notice posted overnight about a missing road survey worker from a temporary crew operating along that stretch. The summary mentioned reflective safety gear, a backpack with mounted markers, and erratic behavior. The worker had been reported for leaving the crew area on foot after an argument and was found hours later with a leg injury several miles south of where crews were staged. The details aligned without needing imagination. A person wearing a reflective vest and additional markers would create moving points of light. A backpack with mounted reflectors would rise and fall with a runner's stride. Someone exhausted and disoriented could pace a car without understanding the danger, using the road edge as a guide. When I braked, they stopped to avoid the vehicle. When I accelerated, they chased the light because it was the only fixed thing in a dark place. I did not feel relief right away. The explanation settled slowly. The desert had not produced something unknowable. It had amplified a human mistake until it felt unreal. That night stays with me because of how close fear came to reason, how a simple set of circumstances turned a lonely road into a threat. I finished the drive and started the job. I still avoid overnight stretches when I can. When I cannot, I watch the reflectors. I trust the posts. I do not trust the ones that move. I was driving north on Route 17 just after midnight, the road mostly empty the way it gets once the last shift changes have settled and the bars have gone quiet. August air pressed warm against the open vents, smelling faintly of trees and hot pavement. I had worked late, my body running on caffeine and habit, eyes steady but tired. The dashboard clock glowed a dull green. The radio stayed off. I wanted the drive to pass without friction. The highway curved through long wooded stretches broken by reflective signs, and the occasional rest pull off. My headlights cut a narrow tunnel ahead. Somewhere past a gentle rise, I caught sight of another car. A dark sedan, maybe gray or black, hard to tell at that distance. It sat in the right lane, a little too close to the line, drifting toward the shoulder and then back again. The motion was slow and lazy, not sharp enough to look mechanical, not controlled enough to look normal. At first I assumed the driver was tired. It matched the hour. I eased off the gas to watch. The sedan corrected itself, then wandered again. The tires kissed the rumble strip. The sound reached me even through closed glass, a low buzzing scrape that faded once the car drifted back into its lane. I stayed behind for a minute, matching speed. The sedan held steady at just under the limit, then dipped again. My grip tightened on the wheel. I did not want to sit behind a drunk driver on an empty highway with no easy exits. I flicked my high beams once, then again, a brief flash meant to alert, not challenge. The car did not react. No brake lights. No signal. The drifting continued. I checked the left lane. Empty. I moved over and began to pass, keeping distance. As I pulled alongside, I glanced right, expecting to see someone slumped forward or staring straight ahead with that glassy focus that comes from exhaustion. The driver's seat was empty. For a half second my brain rejected what my eyes sent back. I looked again, longer this time, forcing myself to catalog details. The seatbelt lay flat across the seat, clicked into place, drawn tight as if someone had buckled it before getting out. The seat itself sat upright, not pushed back. The headrest was adjusted to a normal height. The steering wheel turned slightly left, then right, small corrections like a person keeping within the lane. Both front windows were down. The interior light was off. The cabin looked clean, no bags, no clutter. The wheel moved again, subtle, controlled. The car stayed aligned with the road. As I paced the sedan, something else reached me. A sound, thin and irregular, coming from inside the car. It reminded me of fingernails dragged across a hard surface, plastic or vinyl, uneven and repetitive. It rose and fell with no rhythm I could place. The noise cut through the low hum of tires and wind and set my teeth on edge. My heart began to pound hard enough that I felt it in my throat. I slowed without thinking, letting the sedan creep ahead. The scraping continued. The wheel twitched. The car drifted closer to the center line, then corrected. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Someone leaned down, a child maybe, though the seatbelt detail did not fit. A remote control experiment, though the precision felt wrong for that. A medical emergency where the driver had collapsed out of view, foot still pressing the pedal, hands maybe hooked under the wheel. None of the thoughts settled. The sedan responded to my slowing by accelerating. Not sharply, but enough to open space. The engine note climbed. The scraping sound grew fainter as the distance widened. I stayed where I was, hands steady now through force, eyes locked on the taillights. Ahead, the road bent left, a long curve bordered by trees and rock. The sedan leaned into it smoothly, brake lights never flashing. Halfway through the bend, The taillights slipped behind the trees and disappeared. I expected them to reappear on the straight beyond. They did not. I crested the curve seconds later. The lane ahead was empty. No shoulder lights. No hazard flash. No debris. Just open highway stretching into darkness. I eased off, scanning mirrors and shoulders, pulse loud in my ears. There was nowhere the car could have gone without leaving a trace. No exit ramp. No pull-off. No side road. I drove on another mile, then two, slowing, watching. The scraping sound was gone. The road returned to its quiet rhythm. My hands began to shake once the immediate tension drained. I pulled into the next rest area, parked under a light, and sat with the engine running. I did not call anyone right away. I needed to understand what I had seen before trying to explain it. I replayed the image of the empty seat, the buckled belt, the wheel moving as if guided. The sound gnawed at me most of all. It felt intentional, purposeful, but I could not assign it a source. After a few minutes, I called state police and reported what happened, sticking to facts. An empty driver's seat, a drifting car, a location and time. The dispatcher took the details without comment and said a unit would check the area. I waited. Another patrol car passed through the rest area, slowing briefly, then continued on. I finished the drive home without further incident, every passing car making my shoulders tense, every shadow pulling my focus. 2 days later, an officer called me back. He said they had no reports of an abandoned or missing sedan matching my description on Route 17 that night. No accidents. No traffic stops. No calls from other drivers. Nothing. I pressed for possibilities. He offered some, measured in calm. A driver slumped low could appear absent at a glance. The seatbelt could have been buckled without being worn. Reflections and angles at night could distort perception. Sounds carry strangely between vehicles at speed. Another car nearby might have produced the scraping noise. He asked if I was tired that night. I said yes, but not impaired. He noted it and thanked me for reporting. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about the explanations until the coffee went cold. Each one accounted for a piece, but never the whole. I drove that stretch again weeks later in daylight, noting the curve where the car vanished. There was no place to hide a vehicle without signs. No steep drop close enough. No service road concealed by brush. Months passed. The image faded, but never fully left. Every time I saw a car drift late at night, my chest tightened. I learned more about modern vehicles, about lane assist systems, adaptive steering, electronic controls that could make small corrections without human input. I read about drivers who unbuckled, leaned out windows, lost consciousness in strange positions. I found reports of objects left loose inside cabins making unsettling sounds at speed. The most likely explanation settled into place slowly. The driver may have suffered a medical event, slipped down low, maybe even onto the floor, hands or clothing catching the wheel just enough to guide it. The scraping could have been a shoe or fingernails against the dash as the body shifted with the car's motion. The speed change could have come from a foot pressing harder as muscles tightened. At the curve, the car may have taken an exit I missed in the dark or slowed sharply beyond my line of sight, blending into the night before I could see. That explanation does not comfort me, but it fits within the world I know. It keeps the road from becoming something else entirely. Still, when I drive Route 17 after midnight, I do not linger beside other cars. I pass cleanly or fall back. I keep my radio off. I listen to the tires and the wind and the engine, and I remember the empty seat and the wheel that turned on its own, guided by something I never saw. We left the interstate close to 2 in the morning because the dog would not settle and my eyes kept slipping shut in long blinks. The road sign said rest area, but gave no distance. We followed the ramp anyway. The desert around us was flat and black, the sky washed pale with stars. The air through the open windows smelled like dust and old heat. Even at night the ground held warmth. The rest area appeared suddenly, a low concrete island surrounded by empty land. Tall light poles stood around the lot, every bulb lit, casting sharp white circles on the pavement. No other cars, no semis, no trash moving in the wind. The place looked awake, but abandoned at the same time. I parked near the building, not right up against it, leaving space to pull out fast if needed. The engine noise died, and the quiet pressed in. The dog stayed rigid in the back seat. He usually jumped down as soon as the door opened, especially if water was involved. This time he stayed low, eyes wide, chest tight. His whining was soft and steady, not loud enough to echo but impossible to ignore. My girlfriend rubbed his head and tried to coax him forward without speaking. He refused to move. His nails scraped once against the seat, then stopped. The sound felt too loud. I grabbed the water jug and stepped out alone. The lights hummed faintly. Insects clicked in the dark beyond the pavement. The building had 2 entrances, both with glass doors. A sign on one said closed. The other had no sign, but the handle did not move. Inside I could see empty vending machines and a hallway that led to restrooms. The place looked clean, too clean for how empty it was. As I stood there, a sound came from above. It was not a thump. It was not a scrape. It was the sound of shoes on gravel moving in a slow, careful circle. The roof was flat and edged with loose stone. Whoever was up there was not pacing back and forth. The steps curved. They went around the building, steady and measured. I froze where I stood. The sound continued. Each step landed with the same weight, the same spacing. No rush. No stumble. I backed away toward the car without turning my back. The sound stayed overhead, matching my movement, still circling. When I reached the car, I felt the vibration through the roof as the steps passed above us. I opened the back door and set the water jug on the ground. The dog leaned forward just enough to drink, never stepping out. His body shook the whole time. My girlfriend watched the building, her face pale under the light. The steps continued. I noticed then the cameras. One on each corner of the building, dome-shaped and dark. They made a faint mechanical whine as they turned. I heard it clearly once I focused on it. The sound shifted left, then right. The pitch changed as the camera tracked movement. When I stepped a foot to the side, the sound followed. When I stopped, it stopped. The dog finished drinking and pulled back inside. I closed the door quietly. The steps on the roof slowed, then stopped directly above the car. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the steps started again, circling once more. I got into the driver's seat. My hands were slick on the wheel. I checked the mirrors. The lot stayed empty. The desert beyond the lights was a solid wall of black. The steps ended again. This time they stopped closer to the edge of the roof, just above the front of the car. I waited for something to drop. Nothing did. The camera sound shifted again, louder now, as if the lens angled downward. The feeling of being watched became physical. My shoulders tightened. My breathing went shallow without me meaning to. I started the engine. The sound cut through the quiet. The steps resumed instantly, faster now, moving toward the back of the building. Not running, just quicker. I put the car in reverse and backed out slow, keeping the building in view. As we turned, I glanced at the spot where we had been parked. Someone stood there. He had not been there before. He stood exactly where the driver door had been, feet apart, shoulders slightly hunched forward. One arm hung loose. The other rested against his side. His head was tilted the same way mine had been when I leaned against the door earlier, stretching my back. As I watched, he shifted his weight the same way I had, with the same pause between movements. It was delayed, like he was following a pattern he had just learned. His clothes were light-colored, blending into the glare. I could not see his face clearly. The light erased details. He did not wave. He did not step forward. He only stood there and mirrored my posture again, a few seconds behind. I turned the wheel and pulled onto the exit road. I did not look back again until the building lights vanished behind us. We drove for nearly an hour before stopping. Neither of us spoke. The dog stayed pressed against the seat, silent now. When we finally pulled over at a gas station with people and noise and movement, my hands were cramped from gripping the wheel. Later, in daylight, the pieces settled into something that made sense. The rest area was likely closed for maintenance or staffing issues. The cameras were active because they always are, even when doors are locked. The person on the roof was likely someone who had been living there, using the structure for shelter. The circling steps fit someone checking the perimeter, staying above eye level. The mimicry fit someone watching closely, copying movement as a way to intimidate or test reactions. Standing in the exact place we had been parked felt intentional, a way to show he had been there the whole time. Nothing chased us. Nothing touched the car. No laws were broken in a way that left proof. But the knowledge that someone had been above us, watching, studying, waiting, and choosing when to be seen stayed with me. I do not stop at empty rest areas anymore, no matter how tired I am. If the lights are on and no one is there, I keep driving. I had been running nights for years by then, long enough to know how the interstate feels after midnight. I 80 across Wyoming is a wide, cold line through nothing. In March, the wind never really stops. It slides across the snowpack and pushes at the trailer like a steady hand. The cab stays warm, but the glass is always cold. The road noise settles into a pattern that pulls your thoughts flat. That is why most drivers keep the CB quiet at night. The radio breaks the rhythm and brings people into your head when you are trying to stay narrow and focused. That run started like dozens before it. Solo freight, sealed trailer, no deadline that required speeding. I rolled west with the cruise set just under the limit, watching the reflectors tick by. The moon was low and thin. Snow lay in long gray sheets beyond the shoulders. There were no lights except my own and the red dots of distant taillights far ahead. I had not heard another voice on the radio since Cheyenne. The CB came alive without warning. No call sign, no chatter. Just sound. Slow breathing, close to the microphone, uneven like someone had been walking. At first I assumed someone had leaned on their mic by mistake. That happens. I reached for the knob to turn the volume down, then paused. The breathing stopped. A whisper followed. Not words in a sentence, just numbers. A mile marker, then another one, spoken low and flat. They matched the signs ahead of me. I checked the next reflector count, then the sign itself. The numbers were right. The timing was right too. The voice spoke them before I reached them, not after. I left the radio alone and kept my eyes on the road. The whisper continued at intervals, never rushed, never loud. It described where I was headed, not where I had been. The voice added details without prompting. Left shoulder packed with snow. A shallow drift across the right lane near an overpass. Wind gusts at a cut through a low hill. Each thing appeared exactly as described, always moments ahead of my headlights. I told myself it was coincidence layered on fatigue. That explanation did not hold for long. The voice mentioned my truck. Not the company name, but the shape of the trailer, the marker lights, the way one of the amber bulbs on the passenger side flickered when the wind hit it. I glanced at the reflection in the mirror and saw the light blink just as described. I had known about that bulb for weeks and kept forgetting to replace it. My hands stayed steady on the wheel. My breathing slowed on purpose. I did not touch the microphone. I listened. The sound of breathing returned between the whispers, close and wet, like the mic was almost in the mouth. There was no background noise. No engine rumble, no wind, no static. Just the breathing and the numbers. I keyed the mic once. The act felt heavier than it should have. The moment the carrier clicked, the breathing stopped. What followed was a burst of sound that registered as laughter without words. Then a statement that landed like weight. It claimed that the speaker was already behind me, that I had passed them without seeing them. The channel went quiet again except for breathing. I did not slow down. I did not speed up. I kept the truck centered in the lane and watched the mirrors. The road behind me stayed empty, 2 dark lanes and snow. No headlights, no hazard lights. I scanned the shoulders for movement. Nothing. The whispers resumed. More mile markers. More description of the road ahead. The accuracy did not slip. Each prediction came true in my lights. I felt watched in a way that had nothing to do with superstition and everything to do with exposure. The cab suddenly felt like a glass box set in a frozen field. Several minutes later, I crested a gentle rise and saw a shape in the median. A man stood there between the eastbound lanes, boots planted in the snow, coat open despite the cold. He waved with one arm in a slow, tired motion. In the other hand, he held a handheld CB microphone, the cord trailing into darkness. There was no truck nearby, no flashers, no road service vehicle. His face looked pale in my headlights, eyes squinting against the glare. He did not step toward the road. He stayed in the median and kept waving. I stayed in my lane and passed him at speed. As the trailer cleared, I checked the mirror. He did not move to follow. He stayed where he was, shrinking into the dark. The radio breathing grew louder. For the next hour, the channel never closed. The breathing continued without pause. The whispering stopped. No more numbers. Just that sound, steady and close. I turned the volume down until it was barely audible, then turned it back up to be sure it was still there. It was. I switched channels. Silence. I switched back. The breathing returned immediately. I considered pulling over at a way station or rest area, then dismissed it. There were long stretches without services, and stopping would put me alone on the shoulder in the dark. I kept driving. Dawn took a long time to show itself. The sky lightened from black to deep blue, then gray. The breathing did not change. It did not react to the light. It stayed constant until the sun finally broke the horizon and the road turned silver. At that moment the channel went dead. No click, no static, just nothing. I drove another 100 miles before stopping. At a truck stop I shut the engine down and sat in the quiet. My hands shook when I reached for the logbook. I did a full walk around the rig. The flickering bulb had gone dark entirely. The lens was cracked, fresh damage, like it had been hit by ice or debris. I reported the incident later that morning to a state trooper I knew from past runs. I kept it factual. No speculation. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he nodded once and told me something that closed the circle tighter than I liked. There had been a stranded driver reported that night near the median, where I saw the man. His rig had lost power and slid to a stop in the eastbound lanes. He had no coat because it was in the sleeper and the cab had gone dark. He carried a handheld CB for emergencies. He had been trying to flag help while calling out mile markers to anyone listening. He stayed on the channel because his transmit button jammed when he dropped the mic in the snow. The battery lasted hours. He was found at dawn with severe exposure. Alive, but barely. He told responders he had watched a westbound truck pass without slowing. He said he had tried to warn the driver about drifts and wind. He said he could see the truck clearly and described it in detail. The trooper looked at me when he said that part. The breathing came from the jammed mic. The laughter was wind noise distorted by a low battery. The claim about being behind me was a mistake made by a man confused and freezing, watching taillights fade and trying to make sense of his position on a divided highway. The explanation fit every piece. That is what I hold on to. Still, I do not run the CB at night anymore. When the road is empty and the wind leans on the trailer, I let the silence do its work.